And hello everybody, welcome back to the channel. Today, of course, we spent a lot of time covering the ongoings in the Middle East, and whilst that is good news, there is a huge shitstorm brewing in the United Kingdom. Starmer, currently absent. However, his dark past and the Labour Party's dark past with regard to China has surfaced, and it's serious. Very, very, very serious. At the time of recording, Kemi Badenoch has been just addressing and speaking to the House of Commons with regard to it. Starmer needs to answer these questions. And in fact, there is a strong impression that Labour undermined Britain's national security because Starmer was too weak to do anything other than appease China. This is serious, and this could spell the end of Keir Starmer's premiership if found that he did put our national security at threat. As stated, there's a whole shitplosion that has erupted. We are going to be going through all of it, discussing it, going to the House of Commons as well to listen to what Kemi Badenoch had to say. But as stated, this is not going anywhere. And Keir Starmer can ignore it. He can do and bring out his governmental spokespersons all he likes, but he's going to need to address this head on because it's very, very serious allegations. As always, guys, before we do get into the video, please do hit the like button and hit the subscribe button for more. So, as stated, ladies and gentlemen, again, there's a lot of moving parts as a part of this video, but essentially this is what he's in hot water for. This will give you a good sort of summary, and then we'll get into the sort of Tory reaction with regard to it, some more reaction with regard to all of it. There's a lot of videos to go through.
Well, absolutely, and politically it's very lucky for Keir Starmer that today is such a big foreign news day, because if it weren't, we would all be talking about the collapse of this China spying case. Now, Keir Starmer is in really, really hot water over this. There are allegations printed over the weekend that his national security advisor, Jonathan Powell, who is also a very close personal ally of the Prime Minister, essentially allowed the case against these two men accused of spying for China. He allowed that case to collapse in order to politically further Britain's relationship with Beijing. Now, in the very long lobby meeting I've just come out of now, the Prime Minister's chief spokesman said that that was categorically untrue, that Jonathan Powell did not deliberately nix the government's evidence to make that trial collapse. The government is claiming that this is all the fault of the Tories, the previous government, for not updating the Official Secrets Act. So what the government is essentially saying is that the CPS were unable to prosecute because the threshold for China to be designated a threat to the UK was incredibly high, and that was all the fault of the Tories. Essentially, that this was all a technicality because the old laws weren't very good and weren't updated properly. It still leaves a lot of questions unanswered. Why? Who was negotiating, for example, on behalf of the government? Who was the CPS was asking and asking for months and months and months to have evidence to help convict these two men accused of spying for China, and someone in the government was answering their questions. Who was answering their questions, and why was that evidence not received by the CPS? Now, the government claims that it wasn't received because China simply couldn't be designated a threat because the previous government refused to designate China as a threat. Officially, that is true, but there's plenty of evidence on and off the record showing that previous ministers in the last government did consider that China was an epoch-defining challenge, they said, and that there were all sorts of threats from China. So there is a lot of people are saying that actually, if the government had really wanted to help the CPS make those prosecutions, it could have provided a little bit more evidence than it provided. So the question being levelled at Keir Starmer now is it really true that you did everything in your power, that your ministers did everything in your power, that your national security advisor did everything in his power to help the CPS find the evidence to prosecute these men? Or is there a possibility that it was more politically convenient for Britain, when Britain obviously wants closer relationship with China, to let this case be swept under the rug? And I think there are going to be a lot more questions for Keir Starmer to answer on that, not least from Priti Patel, the Shadow Home Secretary in the House of Commons.
Exactly, and I have a weird feeling that it is certainly the latter, especially with his absence. Talking of Priti Patel, this is of course what she has said in accusing him of all of these things. Have a watch.
Keir Starmer and his Labour government have put our national security at risk. Since July last year, they've been kowtowing to China, a dangerous authoritarian country that poses a direct threat to Britain and our interests. With Rachel Reeves and Labour crashing the British economy, they've been going cap in hand, begging their Chinese Communist Party pals in Beijing for help. In return, they are letting China undermine our security. First, Labour have helped China with their super embassy planning application, a development that has been dubbed a spy hub, from where China will cause us harm and target Chinese and Hong Kong democracy campaigners. Second, they have failed to stand up to the threats they pose by putting them on the enhanced tier of FIRS, a scheme set up to protect Britain from dangerous foreign influence. And now they have caused a criminal case involving Chinese spies operating in Parliament to collapse. Labour have held secret meetings with Chinese officials, and then all of a sudden, a serious criminal case collapsed because Labour will not identify China as a threat to Britain. The last Conservative government was clear that China's hostile activity posed a threat to our country and the well-being of the British people. So why is Starmer so weak and so keen to kowtow to a country that spies on us and our allies, steals our commercial and military secrets, and which supports Putin's Russia and the war in Ukraine? They are hurting our economy and our country. The British people deserves answers.
And answers is what we need. As I said, Starmer is seriously lucky that, of course, it's a big day geopolitically. And the mainstream media are not going on this story enough. That's why we're covering it as much as we can, because this guy needs to be held account with regard to it. Now, Kemi Badenoch earlier on, we're going to get to her in the House of Commons in a minute as well. She said the government's story on the alleged China spy scandal keeps changing. The strong impression is that Labour have undermined the British national security because Starmer is too weak to do anything other than appease China. My letter and questions to Keir Starmer. So this is what she said. Dear Prime Minister, I'm writing regarding the alleged Chinese spy scandal and set out several key questions which remain unanswered. This is a matter of the utmost importance involving alleged spying on members of Parliament. It seems that you and your ministers have been too weak to stand up to Beijing on a crucial matter of national security. Your government's account of what happened has changed repeatedly. Instead of setting out the full facts before the House of Commons today, you are planning to travel to the Middle East. If you will not make a statement yourself, will you instruct a senior minister to clear things up once and for all through a parliamentary statement? The public and Parliament deserve answers and transparency. First, when the prosecution was dropped on the 15th of September, ministers said they were surprised that they had only become aware of the decision that day. Minister Dan Jarvis told the Commons that this decision had been an entirely independent one. But we now know neither of these claims were true. Stephen Parkinson, the Director of Public Prosecutions, has said he spent months in discussion within the government, trying to get evidence released so it was not entirely independent and not a surprise. Second, you claimed the Crown Prosecution Service was unable to prosecute because of the failure of a previous government to designate China as an enemy in some sense. But the idea of designation is red herring, as various leading lawyers have pointed out that this is not how the law works. Your argument has been refuted by, amongst others, the former Director of Public Prosecutions, Lord MacDonald, the former Cabinet Secretary and the head of the Civil Service, Lord Case, the former head of MI6, Sir Richard Dearlove, the former National Security Advisor and Cabinet Secretary, Lord Sedwell, and Mark Elliott, Professor of Public Law at the University of Cambridge. Jonathan Hall, KC, the independent reviewer of terrorism and state threat legislation, has also cast doubt on the official explanation. Third, the Home Secretary and your official spokesman both told journalists that a crucial meeting in early September did not take place. But this third line now also appears to be crumbling. Asked whether your National Security Advisor, Jonathan Powell, has been in any discussions about the case, Education Secretary Bridget Phillipson did not deny this, instead arguing that Powell was not involved in the substance of the case, whatever that means. Rather than being surprised bystanders, as ministers initially implied, we also know from the Sunday Times that the Foreign Office officials approached the Lord Speaker proposing a deal in which China would drop sanctions on parliamentarians in return for the Chinese ambassador being allowed to back into Parliament. The Sunday Times has also reported that the Jing'ai, the Chinese owners of British Steel, offered to waive the £1 billion compensation that they claim to be owed by the British government for the steelworks in Scunthorpe. Your government is now on its fourth different story about this scandal. It leaves a strong impression that your government undermined Britain's national security because you are too weak to do anything other than appease China. You must answer these simple questions. Is your argument that no minister knew anything of the government's interactions with the CPS over the many months in which your government refused to give the CPS the material it wanted? Did ministers at HMT, Home Office, or the FCDO ever brief you, the Prime Minister, about the matter or refer it in any way? Did Jonathan Powell mention it to you at any point? Is your government still denying that a meeting including Jonathan Powell and FCDO Permanent Secretary took place in early September? If not, why did the Home Secretary and your spokesman deny this? Ministers now say your National Security Advisor was not involved in the substance of the case and the discussions around that. What does it mean if he was not involved in this decision over the months not to give the CPS what they needed? Then who was? Does the government now accept that what Jan Darvis told the House of Commons on the 15th of September, i.e. that the government had no warning and wasn't involved, was misleading? Will you ensure that the record is corrected urgently? Is it still your government's position to claim that it would have been impossible to argue that China was a threat in court? If so, do you think the former head of public prosecutions, two former cabinet secretaries and a former head of MI6 are all wrong? I look forward to your rapid reply. Yours sincerely, Kemi Badenoch. So yeah, more on that one. We're going to get to her now. Actually, let's go straight to her in the sort of House of Commons. This is what she was saying 20 minutes ago.
Two men have been accused of spying on MPs in this very building. The CPS had what it felt was a clear and compelling case to prosecute. But the trial has collapsed because for months and months, the government has been refusing to give the CPS vital information. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This looks like a deliberate decision to collapse the case and curry favor with the regime in China. I suspect that they have decided that closer economic ties with China were more important than due process and our national security. And if this is the case, if that was the decision of this government, then they should just tell us that and have the backbone to admit it. They should explain it to the public, they should explain it to the CPS, they should explain it to our international allies and let them all be the judge. Madam Deputy Speaker, this is not going away. There is nowhere to hide. I wrote to the Prime Minister today and I'd like to know when I will get a response to my questions. And we have also written to the CPS to ask if this trial can be reopened if the government finally provides the evidence it's been holding back. We know that the evidence that the CPS needs exists. And if the government decides not to provide it, then we will know it is because this weak Prime Minister does not have the backbone to stand up to Beijing.
And it's certainly that is the case. Now, it's not every day that I agree with what the Tories are saying, but what they're saying, I have a feeling that is exactly the truth. They've changed the story 4 times now. I think it's definitely to try and get closer to sort of Beijing, which is a massive national security threat. And again, this guy has nowhere to hide. He's just lucky that today it's a massive day in the Middle East. He had no right being out there anyway, but that's a conversation for another day. But my goodness me, this is so serious. And again, he's just changing. Everyone's wriggling. And there's so many people that came out against what he initially said. He's in hot water. Final video here, guys, is from Chris Philp.
May have had something to do with him, which is the Chinese prosecution case against those 2 British individuals, the spying case. And you would prefer, as I understand it, Chris, that he was in the House today answering questions on that.
Well, precisely. Instead of running off overseas to claim credit for something that's nothing to do with him, he should be behind me in Parliament answering the very serious questions Keir Starmer has to answer about why it was his government chose to withhold evidence which the government has in its possession, which, if they wanted to, they could have handed over to the Crown Prosecution Service, who'd been asking for the evidence for many, many months. But instead, Keir Starmer's government chose to withhold that evidence, causing the China spy trial to collapse. And the reason for that is that the Labour government are more interested in kowtowing to the Chinese for economic reasons to help bail them out of their financial mess that Labour has created. They're more interested in that than they are in protecting our national security. And Keir Starmer now needs to, their story keeps changing, the government's story keeps changing every time something they say is proven to be untrue. So Keir Starmer now needs to tell us who exactly decided to withhold this evidence. Many people say Jonathan Powell was intimately involved in that decision. Was Keir Starmer himself aware of all of this going on? We need answers to those questions. The Labour government story keeps changing. First of all, back in September, that one of their ministers claimed to me in Parliament that the Labour government had no idea what was going on, nothing to do with them, it was all down to the CPS. And the Crown Prosecution Service were then so angry, they wrote 3 public letters exposing that as untrue. And that's why we need Keir Starmer, the Prime Minister, in Parliament today, answering these questions. What did he know and when? What exactly did Jonathan Powell have to do with this? Who took the decision in government to withhold this evidence? All of these questions are completely unanswered at the moment. No wonder Keir Starmer has decided to go and hide in Egypt today.
Exactly, and you have a feeling exactly it all sort of makes sense now. Of course, cozying up to China, as stated, economically they've made us out to be a mess. And of course, seeing with the digital ID, getting close to a sort of communist nation. Yeah, I can see where the attractiveness comes from this Labour government and Keir Starmer. It's of course the ideal country that they want to be like. But this isn't going anywhere, guys. This isn't going anywhere. And it's a very serious thing as well. So I'll be interested to see what happens and what Keir Starmer's next story is. His 5th story of changing how things have went on. But it's big. I'm surprised no mainstream media really is covering it that much, considering how big of a story it is. But as always, I'm interested to know your opinion down there in the comment section below. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, and I'll see you all next time. Take care. Peace.